the Dadhammer Podcast, a casual Warhammer show where we discuss all things 40K, Age of Sigmar, and literally everything else Warhammer related. So whether you are a beginner or a seasoned veteran to Warhammer, we're glad that you've joined us on your Warhammer journey. I am your host, David the Warboss, and I am joined, as always, by Medicae Steve. Steve, how we doing, buddy?
Excellent. Beautiful Sunday. How are you doing?
Indeed. I'm doing great. I am very excited for this episode. We usually start off with a grand intro and do some kind of chit chat and all of that. But I'm a little overly excited, I think, for this. We've got a special episode and a special guest. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him in here in a second. But for anyone listening, we're trying to do a few more interviews with our show, so I really appreciate your support, and definitely give us a shout out and some notes sent to contact@dadhammerstudios.com if you like this type of content or want to see more. But we have a very, very special guest today, someone that I have personally looked up to for quite some time, whether he knows it or not. He is a true pioneer in the Warhammer community, founder of the 40K training academy, Vanguard Tactics, that enables students to become better players, but most importantly, and I guess most endearing to me, to do so with the core values of honesty, integrity, and fair play. And also, probably unbeknownst to most people, a major inspiration to the founding of Dadhammer. To say that I'm honored and fortunate to have him as a guest is a massive understatement. Mr. Stephen Box of Vanguard Tactics, welcome to the show, sir.
Well, I think your introduction was just way over. I'll have to pay you later, but yeah. I mean, thank you so much. It's extremely very humbling what you've just said. So thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. Yeah,
well,
it really is.
We're thrilled to have you. Thank you for taking up some of your time to chat with us. I've listened to a lot of different of the interviews that you've done, seen several videos, and just resonated with your message. I think is something that I personally, and I wanted to. I haven't told you this, but I wanted to do it just on the show here. Steve and I have been playing Warhammer for many years. And I've always thought about, could we do some kind of Warhammer thing, a podcast, a YouTube channel? I don't know, anything that would allow us to be creative and do something like that. And I thought, I don't know. It's so that the competitive scene is so hardcore. We don't know the rules enough. It's the leap is so far to get there. And but I was watching one of your interviews, and you had talked about just being a positive force and having integrity, fair play, being an honest person. And, I've been in leadership in my full-time job for a very long time, and being an empathetic leader and trying just to help people see the positive side of life and everything that we do. And the minute I heard that, I thought, that's it. Okay, I can do that, right? We're gonna talk to people that have never played this game, or maybe intimidated by the modeling and the miniatures and the painting and all the competitive rules and everything. Let's reach out to those people and see people like us, because we started somewhere. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for being here and just helping us start this whole thing. And even though you didn't even know it from across the pond, here we are. So
I thought what you were actually going to say. I saw one of your videos and I thought, if this idiot can do it, anybody can. And it really is that simple. Yeah, it really is that simple. If you've got a passion to do something, then do it. It shouldn't hold you back. I remember I started my. Yeah, exactly. Just passion just drives it, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking the idiot part. If this.
Oh yeah. I thought that too, but I'm glad you said it, so I didn't have to.
Now it's so much better now. Yeah.
I started the channel with a webcam, and it was funny the other day. Somebody put, "Oh, did Mummy and Daddy fund this?" I was like, "No, you've got no idea the amount of work that's gone into the setup that we have now, the amount of cameras that I've gone through and sold and traded in to upgrade the next one." And yeah, you started with a webcam, and that was it.
Yeah, I think now we just started with the podcast, and I do, I've done presentations and things like this for a long time, and especially during COVID where everybody went video conferencing. And I just thought, we'll just do this and I'll just hit record and we'll see what happens. What's the worst that could possibly happen? And the worst is, you get somebody on YouTube that'll throw in a comment. We've already gotten those, and that somebody's just angry at the world and they want to take it out on you. And but joke's on them. I've worked in management for a long time, so I'm good. I'm good. So I see that stuff and it just kind of makes me laugh now. But no, one of the first questions that I wanted to talk to you about is, for those that are not aware, I think most people are aware of Vanguard Tactics. The marketing is working. I think it's everywhere, and it's a good thing. For me, seeing a Warhammer brand that is waving the banner of just a positive influence in the community is really, really cool. So I think it's great. But for those that are not aware, if you wouldn't mind, tell them about yourself, maybe, and then also about Vanguard Tactics in general.
Well, it's quite a heavy question, that one. Where to start? So, brief overview of me. Played when I was younger, stopped for a while. Other things became more interesting, as you can probably imagine, and then got back into the game after a very long hiatus. I was actually preparing for a bodybuilding show. That's what I used to do before this, was compete in international bodybuilding in the fitness model class. And I was, just on the cross trainer no, I wouldn't have been on the cross trainer. I would have been on incline walking, let's be honest. So I would have been doing that. And I found this little mobile game and I was like, I'm bored out of my mind just doing, calories worth of steps. Found this little mobile game, this little Death Watch game. And I was like, this is all right, And then I found myself going on Games Workshop website, and that's when it all started, right? You go down the deep dark hole as soon as you're on that website. So, they talk about the dark web, and I think that's really what they're referring to every time. It's like a pit of just, you're in. That's it. You're not getting out. So I was back in, started with Death Watch, and was in a really, I suppose, not a great relationship at the time, is the best way to put that. And I used playing Warhammer as a way of escaping from that. It was my Tuesday evening. It was the one place this person wouldn't follow me or go to, so it was kind of cool. I could just be meet new people that didn't talk about fitness, and we'd just play games, and that was great, and it did so much more for me. And then I first of all, I think the first thing that was probably the most alarming to me at the time was this kind of negative, like the competitive scene was portrayed in such a negative way. I've always been a competitive person. I've played, I've played international volleyball. I've played national level for volleyball and hockey. I've competed internationally at bodybuilding. So being competitive is just always what I've done. I've competed in powerlifting competitions, all sorts. So in those sports, often they work in more absolutes, especially with powerlifting. You either lift it or you don't. It's very, very black and white. You're either the strongest on the day or you're not. You either train hardest or you didn't. Simple, right? And then it was like, you want to get into tournament play? Well, you're cheesy. Why do you want to do that for? And you were kind of looked down upon because that's what you wanted to do. And I was like, well, yeah, right. I just want to go to tournaments and stuff and do more of this and spend the weekend away from my house, not just Tuesday evening. So I was like, this is going to be great. And then I got there and I was like, well, those people are right. People here are not so great. And then that really encouraged me to start my YouTube channel. A couple of things happened at that time as well. I was massively kind of betrayed by some of the people that are working in my fitness company at the time. They were like some of my best friends, and they actually started a YouTube channel, and they went about things in a very toxic way. If you can imagine some of the biggest trolls that we have as online YouTubers, they kind of did that, but for fitness. And as you can probably imagine, it just didn't sit well with my values. And then I thought, well, they kept rubbing it in my face, and how bad I was at running our company, and that I should let them do the marketing and everything else. And I was like, we went our separate ways, and I thought, cool, I'm going to do a YouTube channel, not in fitness, in this nerdy little game called Warhammer. And my entire thing, I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, walk to Starbucks, work 3 hours on, a video or my Patreon or building a website or, a newsletter, whatever it was. And it really fueled me through a really horrible time in my life. I was in a huge amount of debt because I was trying to build a training app that I never released because the people that betrayed me were in the training app. I'd done all the recording, all the video, and I just didn't have the budget to refilm it. And I literally couldn't even look at it because I just felt so, and it's, totally on me. I let them do it, really. I should have had better paperwork in place. I should have had better contracts, but you're working with your friends. You think it's all going to be fine, right?
Sure.
Until it's not. So, but lessons learned. And I'm actually really glad that they did, because I wouldn't be doing what I do now if they didn't have done what they'd done. I'd still be probably in that fitness business, and it wouldn't be nowhere near as cool and fun as my life is now. So for that, I'm immensely grateful for, and probably should thank them. And then anyway, so yeah, that's when I started Vanguard Tactics, with the ethos though of, well, everyone's saying that this competitive thing is super cheesy or win at all cost, and I was like, I've seen some of that. I certainly had. But that's not everyone, and it can't be everyone, because I've had some amazing games at tournaments at the time, and I was super, like fresh to it all. And I thought, I'm going to bring out a channel that really focuses on the positives, really trying to promote sportsmanship and fair play, is why I kind of quickly coined the podcast, the Competitive 40K Podcast, because I thought, if I just create this space and then I tell people what I think competitive 40K should be, if I can tell enough people, they might believe it. So you can let me know how well I'm doing on that. But anyway, so
we're believers, man. I'm a believer. Yeah, you're the only competitive 40K podcast, right? That's what we'll just say that, right? You're the only one.
Well, some other people have tried to copy the name, but they've added on extra words or whatever. But So I'm
standing on the shoulders of giants.
Well, I was thinking, maybe I should change the name of the podcast this year. Something I'm really considering is changing the name to be the Vanguard Tactics Podcast. But anyway, a competitive Warhammer channel, because we've started to, I think, now want to encourage, and we've worked with so many new players getting into the game. I think we've helped over 1,000 people start the 10th edition, with our start playing courses. So we've got this kind of real grassroots approach, because if we can try and encourage people who are, at the very beginning to, learn with us, then hopefully we can, help them ensure that they enjoy the hobby, that they're around a positive force in the game, and they feel valued, and they feel like the armies that they collect are of value to them, and they see the uses of their army. I think if you consume a lot of Warhammer content as content creators, we sometimes, I don't think we treat our viewers or listeners in the best way, because sometimes our own opinions can massively discourage participation because we don't think something's good.
Right.
And the issue with that is, you might have a collection that you've been collecting for a very long time, but because so and so says that's a rubbish unit because it's in the worst 5, or unit mistakes to take to a tournament. Sure, they might be catchy headlines, but all we're really doing is, I suppose, disincentivizing people to actually play with their models, and that's what we try and change, is to show people what they can do with the models that they own, and that's really important.
Well, you're messing up their. It's almost like they had this dream of walking into a store and everyone is attracted by, oh man, this particular box of miniatures looks really cool. I don't know what they do. I don't know if it's any quote unquote good. I don't know if they're difficult to assess. It doesn't matter. This thing looks cool, and I would love to see what that looks like on the tabletop. And so, you know, Steve and I have talked about this, and we've covered this multiple times on our show. It's like, just play what you think is cool. You know, the balanced data slate and the meta watch and all this hyper competitive 40K stuff comes out. And for those that want to consume that, and, you know, I've listened to your podcast quite a bit, and, you know, just hearing, especially your experiences with LVO, going to LVO, and then some of the things that you recommend for players. This is how to prep. This is what you need to think about. This is, you know, you're wanting to simplify the rules and, you know, to help keep your play tight and at its peak performance. And, you know, I think that for people like us, right, for Steve and I and our friend group, we're casual players. We got into this hobby. We stumbled into it. We think it's cool. We've got kids that might have, you know, come along and played with us or something. We just kind of stumbled into it. And most of our listeners are either new players or casual players, or people that were you know, had grabbed some snacks, some friends, and let's just have a good time. But you can't help but look at the tournament scene and be like, you know, maybe if I played a few more reps and got some more games in, maybe that would be fun. And then we've got another buddy that's joined the show that plays Age of Sigmar, and he goes to tournaments all the time. And he's like, yeah, I'm not the best player, but it's a whole lot of fun. So we started to open up a little bit. And, you know, one question I had for you is your whole ethos around the Vanguard tactics is hyper competitive play and getting trained and ready for all of that. And just, you know, from your bodybuilding career and the whole thing that you've gone through, is very disciplined and regimented and trying to stay at peak performance. And now you've carried that into Warhammer of all things, which, you know, a lot of people would look at and say, oh, you know, that's toys on a board, you know, and they're not wrong, but they're wrong at the same time. You know, it's like, no, it's a whole nother level. So my question to you is that what advice would you give for someone listening to this right now and saying, hey, I just bought a box of Space Marines and I just wanted to paint them, or I got my son or my daughter to paint them, and they're either slapped on with some acrylic paint, they're painted neon pink, and they've got flowers all over them. It doesn't matter. That's where they are. What would you recommend for somebody like that just getting into the hobby and seeing someone like you and the rest of your team at Vanguard Tactics at this different tournament level?
I think the first thing is to understand that it's a process. I've done coaching calls in the past, specifically, I think the bodybuilding kind of example works really well. You know, I was a bodybuilding coach for 10 years, online for fitness and nutrition, prepping bodybuilders for shows, bikini athletes, you name it. And sometimes I'd get someone that go, yeah, I want to do a show and I want to win. And I'm like, so what gives you the entitlement to think that you're going to win a show? You've never competed before.
Right.
You've never you haven't even had a posing lesson yet. You're nowhere near in competitive shape. You've been training for 3 years. There's other people that are going to be competing that have been training for 20 years, that have had, you know, years of posing. They've had multiple placings at shows. They are regimented. They understand what to do when they get stressed out. They understand the process and the journey that they're on. And they're probably going to win it, because they will. But I can encourage you and help you get there so you can learn from that, you know, experience. And if you walk away from that show in a healthy state and you want to do it again, then mission accomplished. That's where the bar should be. So if you're listening to this and you've just started, then you're on a journey, and to understand where you're currently at and where you want to get to is going to be different to absolutely everybody, and that's fine. And sure, you can fast track things. That's why I have an entire course dedicated on helping people become more confident with the rules. And although, you know, people might look at us as like hyper competitive in terms of the results that we put out, to be quite honest, me and the rest of the team, we're super casual, like when we actually play. So we have that same mindset that many other people have. Like, the most important thing for me to go into a tournament is going for dinner after with my friends. That's the thing I've always looked forward to most.
Yeah.
You know, it started off with 4 of us where we could all share a car, which was great. And now I'm booking tables for 20 to 30 people. And someone's, oh, I can't make it now. I've got, and I'm like, oh, this has become a headache. So my point is, that is the thing that I really look forward to most, is the community, the camaraderie, the storytelling. And actually, when we get to the dining room table, not even talking about Warhammer, it's talking about work, family, you know, weird experiences we've had in our lives or whatever. That's the fun bit.
Yeah.
So if you've picked up your first box of models, in fact, I was actually in a shop the other day, and somebody sort of recognized me, and they were helping their friend get into it. And I was like, oh, cool. What models have you bought? And they just picked up the Combat Patrol box, you know, for orcs. And they were like, oh, you know, I was like, don't worry, by the way, you will ruin them. And that's okay. You should ruin them with
totally
as many paint jobs as you can possibly give them. And that's cool. Don't be precious about it. You're on a painting journey as well as an assembling one. God, there's going to be glue everywhere. You're going to get on your hands. You're going to have smudge marks. There's going to be mold lines. There's going to be bits of sprue sticking on some of them. You're going to mess it up, right? To be quite honest. And I think that's the exciting part of actually starting a new venture is, okay, I'm not going to do that again. That for me it is anyway. It's the pain of going through all those different barriers is actually the exciting bit. And that's kind of what I try and instill in people, is that thirst for improvement, you know, and to go, hey, sure, you've just bought your first box of models. In 16 weeks' time, you could be going to a tournament. It's possible. I've seen it happen. I've coached people to it, and they might go, and sometimes they're like, I just want to be able to complete all of my games. And that is normally the bar I set, is play 5 games. If it's a 5-round tournament, play all 5 games. That's an accomplishment. And after that, if you want to go back, great, cool. Who cares about winning? Like, I really get irked when people go, oh yeah, I want to go 3-2. I'm like, cool. I don't care. Like, your win rate really, to be honest, doesn't make any difference. You're not going to remember it. I don't know how many tournaments I went to, and I went 3-2. I can barely even remember the ones that I did last week. So the most important things, though, are going to be that time when me and my friends all went to a tournament, and one of the I brought an army for one of my mates, and I put it to one side at my friend's house when we were all going. He forgot to pick it up in the morning, so we got to the venue without his army.
Oh, nice.
I remember. That's a story I remember, right?
You remember that stuff, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know how I placed or finished. I don't know how many battle points I scored. But what I remember is those experiences when I went to a travel lodge or a hotel and I booked the wrong night. I booked the night before. It's stupid stuff that I remember, right? There, for me, what the game is actually about. Playing the game is just the excuse.
Yeah, and you know, Steve, you and I have been. There's been so many times, and we still have one that will live in infamy, where I've gone over to Steve's house and played, and it was the game was over. We were playing a Combat Patrol game, and the game was over. You were Dark Angels. I don't even remember who I was. Maybe I was
Chaos Space Marines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Stephen, to your point, like I don't, you know, remember half the stuff. However, I remembered he rolled really bad, and then I rolled amazingly well, and then it was just game over in my favor. So that's one of the few times that I remember that I won, because I remember, and we were just laughing the whole time. Like, I don't know how
I called my shot. I called my win too early.
Yeah, that was your problem.
That was the problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, for me and David, like, I have a very high pressure job. I get to see people in sometimes their worst conditions of their life. They're most afraid and everything else. And for me, Warhammer and the entire hobby that's where I run to escape all the pressure stuff that's outside my life, other than my family and getting to spend time with. And honestly, this was to spend time with my son, get to do things that are much more interactive. Because I don't know, I'm an 80s kid. So we grew up on party lines and calling each other on the telephone and showing up at each other's door. And I don't feel
You
my
what?
kids are ever.
You knocked on someone's door.
Indeed,
Wow.
indeed. That's a crazy
I don't
notion.
know. And we weren't arrested, right? It somehow
No, we
happened.
weren't. But for me, you know, I go to Warhammer to escape the drive and all the stuff that I have in my normal work day. You're quite the opposite. You're such a driven individual. If people haven't picked that up in this interview, if they have watched anything about you in the past, but you maintain this very positive and approachable personality. How in the world do you not get burned out on Warhammer? So that's my escape. It's the thing that's your brand, you know. What do you do other things, or is it just all the stuff you just talked about, all the extra details that get sort of drug into that deep, dark black hole of Warhammer? That is that what you get through your day with, you know?
That's a really good question, actually, and something that I've internally battled with, right? So this year, I'd said it to a few people, like my close circle, that I was, and I don't know if I should even say this, but I'm going to, because I'm quite an honest person.
Yeah.
I'd thought about not playing in tournaments anymore. And the reason is, when I go to events like the LVO, the most important thing for me is my workshop that happens the day before the LVO. So I have this huge, like, kind of adrenaline hype / worry about how my workshop's going to go. Are people going to enjoy it? I'm super hard on myself. I'm super critical. So I'm jet lagged. I'm running my workshop, adrenaline super high. I go to bed with this sense of like relief that it's over, and then I've got to play 6 rounds of 40k at some of the highest level that I know I'm going to play at.
Yeah.
And I'm like, am I enjoying this? Because actually what I enjoy the most now is talking to people. I think there was an event in the UK, Warhammer Fest, and game 1, I was interrupted over 30 times by people, which is, hi Steve, I just wanted to say, I love your content, or thanks for what you do. And I had to keep apologizing to my opponent about that. Now, it was amazing to have that experience, but am I actually being a great opponent by that interaction? Probably not, you know. And luckily my opponent didn't mind. They were like, "Oh, I've actually done your course on tournament prep. So if I win, then you can only blame yourself." I was like, "Cool. Well, as long as I get a testimonial, then we're good." So he was actually super chill. But I forgot my psychic phase 3 turns in a row because of just being interrupted or whatever. Yeah. And it's either friends or other players that I know in the community, and insane for LVO, right? So I was like, the amount of pressure that is on me when I go to a tournament is pretty high. And really, I just want to hang out with the community and, not have that. But then equally, I get told, "Oh, it's great when you play on stream, Steve, and people can see, you really, I suppose, like, shine a light on sportsmanship in that, in all that kind of side of stuff." But I have to be very protective of my enjoyment of the hobby, because, and this is what I've explained to people in the past, there are players that I just won't play. Now, some people might say, well, you need to give them a chance. And I'm like, I could, but I have in the past. And to be quite honest, I don't want to play 3 hours with someone if I'm not going to enjoy their company, because if that then puts a negative spin on the hobby for me, I can't perform at my job for particularly well. I don't want any sour tones when I'm talking about the game. I want to be, honest, but positive. If there's something I dislike, I probably don't really shine too much of a light on it, unless it's something that I really want to tackle, like being cheated or something at a tournament. But yeah, so it's been an interesting year with all that kind of said. But what else do? I go to the gym. That's kind of like my hobby now. I'm actually in the middle of preparing for another photo shoot and I haven't done one in 5 years. So that's going to be a bit of a journey for me to do that. I like spending time with my girlfriend. I play other games, like Zombicide is one of my favorite board games to play. Sorry, Games Workshop, cool. But it's just good. And I enjoy painting. Like today I've been painting up Uruk-hai. I painted up 80 Uruk-hai, which nice. I can talk about.
Cool.
A bit of a teaser, but anyway.
Very nice.
So, I think for me, it is possible to get burnt out. It 100% is. But I think for me, I love my job. I love the challenges of running a growing business, one that is very different to many others in our space. And how we, operate is super, interesting, and how we market. And I've just become, I listen to business books every day. I go on different business courses. I'm trying to reinvest in myself to be a better leader for the team, and the rest of it. So I find that my job is super focused, but actually playing sometimes a game of 40K is still relaxing for me. So yeah.
I that it's funny that I think you and I come from almost different sides of the coin, because I've been on the leadership side and working on myself. For everybody's working on themselves to some degree every single day, but at the leadership level, and I've been at different, over very large teams, over small teams. But what I have kind of come to understand is that, and just something that you touched on a second ago, are you having fun? Are you enjoying this? And I'm sure you enjoy playing Warhammer at a tournament, right? That's great. But if you're interrupted constantly, it almost kind of conflicts with who you are. What's the purpose? What are you trying to do as a leader? I mean, you are a leader, whether you're just a leader in the community and you're a face that everyone sees, or you're a leader for your business, right? People look up to you and they're looking to you for that passion and that fire for what you're doing. And, I always have to ask myself the same question. It's like, what? And that's where, Steve and I, when we first started this, I asked, okay, what are we trying to do? What's the goal of this? I mean, we would take walks in the neighborhood and we're like, what if we just hit record? I'm like, yeah, sure. But what are we really trying to achieve? And ultimately we came back to, we want something, and this is part of our mission statement, if you will. We want something that as dads, I've got 2 kids, Steve's got kids, and it's like, I want something that is clean, that people can listen to in the car with their children.
Yeah.
And so that's got to get rid of the negativity. That's got to get rid of the attack, the troll type, even the ultra competitive. And I'm not talking about healthy competitive, because I was an athlete. I played several sports, and now I'm older. I just watch and get my kids involved with sports. But I'm a very competitive person, as Steve will attest to whenever we play. But I'm also just like, I'm here to have a good time. But even when we do this podcast, the core values are, I want people that are parents potentially to put this on here. They're thinking about Warhammer. They kind of like it, but that they can put it on the car with their family and not have to worry that there's something going to come out of the speakers that they're going to, I'm sorry. And that goes against what we started this for. And
I have exactly the same ethos on my channel, is that my content isn't made for children, but it's if we might have the odd pun on stream. And if a child understands what that pun is, I don't think I can take responsibility for that.
That's definitely parental guidance.
So it's one of those that it's not made for children, but it's certainly something that you could have children around and listen to or watch or whatever else. So, and I think that's really good values to have, because you want to. I think what we try and do is we want to put out in the world what we want to see more of. Is typically at the end of the day, that's kind of what it all boils down to. But you asked me earlier the question, like, am I having fun? And I absolutely do. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Is for me, being a person in the industry, for somebody to you know, come over to my game and say hello actually means more to me than playing the game. I don't really care if I make a mistake or they're not the best tactical decision, because, you know, I've just flew over, you know, across the world, and someone has met me for the first time, and maybe they've listened to the content for 6 months or a year or however long, and they've just come over to say hello. That's more important actually than if I made the best tactical decision and, you know, the rest of it. Providing I can still provide a good game for my opponent and they enjoy it, there needs to be that level of kind of, hey, I'm okay with that. So, which is why, you know, I've thought about, you know, if I go to events, do I just host exhibition games where people can book in a game with me instead? So I'm still at the venue, I'm still playing 40K, I can still promote, you know, all the values of what we want to try and do. But when I'm maybe tired or, you know, and jet lagged and the rest of it, if I'm not, it's sometimes, there was a Texas event I went to, and my girlfriend at the time was in a forest fire in Greece, and she was being evacuated, right? Round one.
Wow.
And I couldn't concentrate on my game. I was, you know, constantly on the phone or whatever. And at the end of the game, I was not there mentally. I was making so many mistakes, and I just dropped. I was like, I went over to the, you know, frontline gaming organizers. I was like, hey, I'm really sorry. I know, because they basically helped me get out there, do the workshops for me to play at the event. And I said, I don't think I can be a good opponent for people. I need to drop. And they said, yeah, absolutely. So that's what I did. And then I met a gentleman that later on that day, luckily my girlfriend managed to get evacuated from, you know, the forest fire's fine, on a plane back home. But later on that day, somebody came up to me, and this gentleman said to me, Steve, I really want to buy you a drink. And I was like, okay. I was like, you don't have to do that. And he was like, no, I really want to. I've come all this way to meet you, and I don't have very long to live. I'm terminally ill, and I want to buy you a drink. And I was like, well, let's go to the bar then. And I sat there for 3 hours, maybe even 4, got a little bit too drunk, and just spent 4 hours listening to this person. And I was just, we didn't even talk about Warhammer so much. We spoke about everything else, you know, how they, he was a police officer. I was like, tell me how you got into that, you know, tell me some cool stories.
Life stuff. Yeah.
And it was probably, I look back at one of the funniest, best experiences that I'd had. It was extremely emotional, you know, having that experience. And then the next day, I just played all the people that were on my courses. They're like, oh, Steve, I want to play you. And I was like, okay, well, you can drop from the event. I can play you. And that's what we did. So people dropped out from the event. They'd had a good time playing. But, you know, we played that game instead. And actually, I look back and I think that was a super cool event. It wasn't certainly the event I wanted to play. But there was no pressure. I had a great time. I managed to hopefully do something for somebody that they, you know, tremendously valued. And that gave me a lot more self-worth than if I went 3-2 or 4-1. And that's not to, you know, I suppose discourage people from wanting to do well at tournaments. You absolutely should. You should do your best. You want to be a great opponent in all aspects, whether it's, you know, giving your opponent a good mental challenge. But equally, I think we need to think wider when it comes to the game. About what it really means to us.
And I think for you, I think you're more than just, you're not just a player, right? You're not just a participant at these tournaments. And I think you're if for what it's worth, you know, encouragement for you. I think your brand, your Stephen Box brand, I'm not talking about Vanguard Tactics. Your brand as an individual is someone of, look, I'm going to give my all to this, and I'm going to be honest. I'm going to have integrity about it. And you're going to look for a way to positively impact one person. If you fly all the way to LVO and you can have a chat with a guy and give him a spark in his day, then you did everything that you needed to do, right? It doesn't matter everything else. And so I think that's where, you know, you as an influencer, if you will, have kind of stepped beyond just maybe where you started, and now you're this positive force for so many people. I can't imagine, you know, you just talking about the pressures that you put on yourself with the competitive and the gaming side, but now the pressure you as an entrepreneur, right? Now you're like, well, I want to deliver A+ content every single time. So anytime someone sees me, regardless of whether or not I'm at my best, if I just am jet lagged and I just went through a terrible ordeal in my personal life, someone says, "Hey, Steve, how's it going?" And then you have to switch it on, right? You got to be a thumbs up, positive guy, regardless of what's happened with you, personally. So what kind of challenges outside of the things that you just mentioned, with starting a business, building that brand, where have you been most challenged maybe recently? I mean, you just mentioned the having to deal with this personal conflict back and forth, but I can't imagine the challenges that you're having to deal with just establishing a business. Now you're looking at building at scale. What does that look like for you, and how has that been a challenge for you?
I think, the last 12 months, or probably 18 months, have been super interesting. We went from a couple of people making some YouTube content to a small entrepreneurial business. I don't know the best way to, small startup business.
Yeah.
Where we've had to worry about cash flow. In the UK, we became what's called VAT registered. So this is a huge step in the UK. Not many businesses actually get to become VAT registered. And what it means is the government see you as you can start contributing more. So what they like to do is
congratulations.
They're like, congratulations, you're legit. You're making, basically a certain amount of turnover. I think it's like 85,000 turnover in a year. You then have to pay 20% on every single penny you then make. So you could be earning 84.9 and you don't have to pay that 20% VAT. So when you hit that threshold, you have to do something pretty significant just to stay afloat, because it's not easy. You either have to charge that money onto your customers, or you have to take the hit. And how many businesses that a startup can take a 20% hit? It's immensely difficult.
Yeah. So
and then in the last 18 months, we went from a team of myself being unpaid. So for the first 4 years of this, I haven't taken money out of the business. I've just reinvested everything, or made sure that I could pay wages for everybody else. We had Michael and Seb were both part-time, and then we had somebody else full-time. So that person left, Nicole. We're still on great terms. She found a job that she wanted to do instead. She wanted to go into hairdressing, and it was all the best, wished her all the best of luck. Seb became full-time, Michael became full-time. We then brought on Aaron full-time, who does all of our website marketing and graphics. We then brought on Jake part-time. I started taking a salary. I brought on the team rather than being contractors. They become PAYE, so I have to pay their pensions and everything else. And some of this stuff I'm talking about, you think, well, yeah, it's just basics. Well, it is for a lot of companies because it's been set up for multiple years. But when I'm having to be the accountant for the company, I have to do the forecasting. I have to do, the health and safety and make sure we've got all the right insurances, and I have to make sure that wages get paid, and I have to chase invoices up when they're not paid promptly, and I have to be HR and all the rest of it. Even sometimes taxi driver or social secretary, therapist, social secretary. Sometimes I have to, have empathy. Sometimes I have to be like, no, come on, let's do this. Let's get this done. So that's difficult. That's not easy. And every day I go to bed thinking, I need to pay wages by the end of this month. I need to make sure we pay our rent. We need to invest in some new camera gear. That's, for me, the challenges every single day, is that like looming pressure of, I need to make this work for me and the security of my team, because I want them to be passionate and infused about the work that they do. And I want to see them have a career where they can progress. And that's also difficult as well, is how do I ensure that they can have career progression? Because often in the YouTube channel, how do you progress? Like really what? So it's about bringing in a structure and a hierarchy where there are progressions in the company. And this doesn't happen overnight, but these are the challenges that I've certainly been, going through of late, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is a startup, right? You're creating a business and everything that goes along with it. You have employees, and what I always think is funny is that, you know, I haven't done a true startup myself, but I've been involved in companies that have had that startup mentality, and you have to do the same things all over again. You're having to create the structure, and there's nothing that no one just hands you this. You have to go build it, and then the pressure is like, well, I could either take some time off and relax, or no, this is not just going to poof into existence unless I actually get to work and put in the extra hours and make sure my team has everything they want. So, you know, I see your content online. I see the website. I see the production value. And, you know, we're here just trying to, you know, throw some stuff on there and because we like doing it. And then I have a different level of respect because we've been asked about battle reports. You know, like, oh my gosh, like the amount of production, post-production, setup, cameras, lighting, all that, and then heaven forbid you forget the psychic phase. In the battle report. That's no bueno. You can't do that. You've got to show up and be like, hey, I'm the expert. And so now you've got additional pressure on top of that. And I just like battle reports. This is why folks like Vanguard Tactics are doing it, because of the amount of work, just the sheer amount of effort that goes into that. I know, you know, Steve and I, we're casual players, but we had an episode recently where we talked about attending tournaments, you know, and that there's this different mindset when really there's not. You know, Steve, I know you were chatting with one of our buddies, Stu, about this and asking his, you know, because he plays in a lot of Age of Sigmar tournaments and getting his take on it. And you know, where you fit in, you know, do I take that leap and attend a tournament? And you were chatting with me about that, and playing with your son as well, and just having all these extra games and these different pulls and from different levels. So, you know, Steve, I know you had mentioned to me earlier about like, what do you do about getting into the tournament scene and versus what we do casually?
Yeah, I'm the best opponent because I don't mind losing. It happens quite often for me, and to me it's almost comical. So part of my mindset gets where like, well, you know, this doesn't stress me out. It doesn't stress me out to lose, and I'm like, how do you translate that kind of mindset, this laid back beer and pretzels? You know, we're learning the rules together. We have a core group of friends that come over and we play with kind of the same people all the time. So it becomes like an echo chamber. So we're always bouncing the rules off each other. And like, I don't know if we got it right, but it sounds like we got it right. And everybody in the room says we got it right. So it must be right. But in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't know if that's going to fly at a tournament. And, you know, we kind of want to, after we talk to Stu and now we talk to you, and we want to learn the rules better, because it's easy to sit back, play a game, maybe take 4 or 5 hours, drink a beer, have some snacks, but you have to shift that a little bit. And I think what kind of advice would you have for us laid back sloths like myself that don't mind losing? You know, where do you start focusing your energy into learning the game faster, being a little bit better, being a little bit more concise and consistent about, you know, your play and your strategy, and so that when you do show up at the tournament, even if you're at the bottom table the whole time and you lose all the time, which is cool, you like you said earlier, be a good opponent, be a steward of the game, and kind of help roll through, because you don't want to be that guy that the game ends on round 3 or turn 3 because you just can't get your stuff together, you know.
Well, Steve, I've actually got this really good course. It's called the Academy, and it'll be perfect.
I heard about this.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What a softball.
I mean, straight in there. So what advice would I have in all seriousness? First of all, don't be worried if you don't know all the rules. You are naive to think that everybody at the tournament knows the rules, because they don't.
Okay.
There's often times when I have to get a referee over for a ruling, and I know they don't know the rule. I've been, I suppose, doing this game long enough, involved in certain things, to know that not everybody knows the rules. Okay, and one of those, I had like a funny interaction at LVO. I get a judge over, and I'm like, "Hey, judge, can I get a ruling, please?" And I knew the answer, and sometimes I really do know the answer due to playtesting or whatever. So I know how this should be ruled. But I'm going to ask, "Hey, ref, my opponent and we're wondering how you'd like us to rule this interaction." And I just keep it completely open-ended, and they give the ruling, and I can either sit there and go, "Cool, that was the right ruling," or I can be, "Cool, that's what we're playing today then." So, it was funny after they gave the ruling, and I went up to him after. I said, "I really appreciate you coming over and giving that ruling," because my opponent was being a bit difficult to play actually. And he was like, "Well, it's always awkward for me, Steve, because I come over and I know you know the rule better than I do, but I've got to give a ruling."
Oh,
and,
ouch.
It was something along those lines. Basically, he was like, "I know you know, and that's the thing. I know you know, and I'm having to give a ruling, and I know I'm talking to someone that knows." So, anyway, look, I think the key is not to worry about it.
Okay.
It's a learning opportunity for you. So, I mean, I could sit here and quiz you about some rules, and we could maybe come up with a scenario, right? So,
please don't.
And
Please don't.
we'll role play this out, okay? Exactly what would happen at a tournament, because I think this is like people's biggest fears, right? So, you and I, Steve, we're in combat. What army do you play?
Dark Angels mostly.
Okay, let's move on. Okay,
Failed. You failed.
You've got a unit of Blade Guard led by Azrael. Okay. You're in a ruin. It's completely blocked out. You can't see anything. Okay. But you're up against the wall. I charge you with my sword brethren. Okay. And I'm like, I do some damage. I kill some Blade Guard, but I haven't killed the entire unit. And you say to me, "Steve, I'm going to epic challenge you." So bear in mind, I'm on one side of the wall. You're in the other. You go, "Cool, I want an epic challenge to precision out my character." And I'm going to go, "Well, Steve, I'm really sorry. You can't do that."
Right.
Because in order to use the keyword precision, you need to have line of sight, although you're in combat. It's one of those things that you think you could, because you can still, if you kill the unit first, the character can still kill the character on the other side of the wall. But in order to use precision, you still need line of sight.
Gotcha.
Right.
So
I'd be like, "Well, Steve, don't worry about it. Could you pile in anywhere to see me? If the answer is no, cool. Have your CP back. You didn't know that all rule interaction. I'm not going to make you spend your CP for epic challenge if you can't use it."
Right.
And equally, you could be like, "No, I think I can, because we're in engagement range." And I'd be like, "I don't think you can. I thought there was something about, I listened to this guy, Steven. He was a real idiot, but I think he said something about you need a visibility on a podcast once." So what do? You go, "All right, let's get the rule book. Precision. Right, need visibility. Cool, answer's right there." And if you still can't make your mind up, go, "Should we get a ref to rule it?" "Yeah, sounds great." Ref comes over. "Yeah, you need visibility to make it. But yeah, have your CP back if you've used epic challenge or something." Easy, right? Like, there's no conflict there.
You took the stress right out of it. But yeah, you're right. You're right. The answer's right there. And gamesmanship is the more important factor, right? Like, agree with each other, be polite, and be understanding. And you don't think about that when you sit in our position and you're, eating cookies and drinking a Budweiser. I don't drink Budweiser, but whatever.
No, nobody drinks Budweiser. Why would you say that?
But it's like, oh yeah, well, it's just that's a little rinky dink rule. Whatever, we're just going to skip over it, But then you're thinking about it, you're like, oh man, tournament prep. I don't know what I'm doing. I hope that everybody's as generous as I would be, like give that CP back or talk to it or whatever. So it gets intimidating, and that's.
But here's the thing, Steve. You don't care about the result, right?
Correct.
So you will take the higher ground every single time, which is exactly, if somebody goes, "Oh, well, unlucky, you've spent your CP now," you'd be like, "Cool. well, I'm going to pack up my models. This isn't the way that I like to play the game. You can have the win. You can beat me 100-0. Okay. And I mean, I'm being a bit facetious, but at the end of the day, that there might be the odd person that is a bit like that, right? But if you're not worried about the result, but they really are worried about the result, and that's the difference. You walk away and you're like, that was a bit tough going, and they'll be like, yeah, I got my win, you know, cool. You know, you're not worried, right? Because you know that you play this game for a very different reason than they might be. It's when people start putting their identity on their winning, or their ego, or their pride. That's when you start to run into problems. Sure. Like, would it do my academy well if I won a super major? Maybe. I mean, I remember going to that Texas event, and we went out for like the VIP dinner after the workshop or whatever, and they were like, Steve, I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know where you've ever come in a tournament. I don't know. I've never even looked it up. I don't know if you've ever won a tournament before. I was like, yeah, exactly. So nobody actually cares. It's a little bit like my GCSEs and A-levels that I did here in the UK. Nobody's ever asked me for my grades before. Nobody even ever asked me what degree I got. You know, in fact, I actually had a job once when I was 20. It was my last time being employed. And I remember my manager, they were like, yeah, Steve got a distinction in, and I was like, no, I didn't. I definitely didn't get it. They were like, yeah, we thought you did. I was like, well, I didn't, and I never said that, but you never asked either. You just assumed I did. I was like, so yeah, anyway, my point is, I think when you aren't so fussed about the result, and actually, Steve, you'd be like, okay, cool, that's an interesting interaction. I'm going to make sure next time I've got visibility on an enemy unit to use precision. You've learned something, right? You know, maybe another game, you go to a tournament and you're like, okay, cool. So you're going to split fire with your unit. You've kept a guy back behind a wall to hold an objective, but the other 4 of your devastators are going to shoot the target. Do they get cover? Does the enemy get cover or not?
Oh, that's a great question.
So
one person's behind the wall not shooting. Does the unit that you're shooting get cover?
No.
They do. They do get cover because one model, So this is a weird interaction.
Right? I'm trying to like, you know, I'm a visual person, so I'm trying to visualize that in my head. And you know that half the time when we play, you talked about being a good opponent. My house is where I've got enough room. I've got a ping pong table. That's where we set up everything. I've got storage for all the trains. So everybody comes over and we play. And there's been a couple of times, more than a couple of times probably, where my overly competitive side and my rules lawyering will get in the way of why I invited people over to my house in the first place, which is, Steve, I want to hang out. Like that. That's rule 1. You know, if we get to play a game of Warhammer, awesome. If we don't, that's okay. But there's been several times, and you know, one of the guys, one of our friends, Lee, who has come over, and I taught him how to play. He played when he was a kid with the lead miniatures and the skeletons back with Warhammer Fantasy. And I'm actually I'm going to say soccer, but I'm sure you're football. But I'm a huge fan. I played for 25 years, and he's an English guy. And so I'm like, hey, you're an English guy. Why don't you come? I got season tickets. Let's go watch a game. And we sat down, and excuse me, I sat down, we're watching the game, and he says, hey, what do you do for fun? I'm like, well, you know, I've got my family, I've got a job, and
play Warhammer.
Well, no, I didn't say that. I said, so, you know, I paint these little figures, these little plastic guys. And he was like, oh, you mean like Warhammer? And I looked at him like, again, like Steve, when he was saying, does anyone play this game? And he's like, oh yeah, I used to play as a kid. And then he came over, I taught him how to play. But anyway, the point of the story is that he has now played, I don't know how many games against me. And we were playing one game, and I remember that I was trying so hard to win that I was almost calling out certain rules that I wasn't 100% sure of. And then as someone who's still trying to learn the game, I mean, he was winning. He was going to beat me, but I let my competitive side get out there, and then he started to feel bad and doubting himself, like, well, maybe, you know, I don't understand the rules. And I had to apologize to him, and I said, man, I'm sorry. I let my desire to win get in front of the real reason that I wanted you to come over in the first place, which is so I just want to hang out with my friend.
Yeah.
And I think it's so easy for that to take over with tournament play, especially with complete strangers. So I think what you're doing just in the general community, why it resonated with us so much and why I was so, you know, thrilled to have you on the show. It's like, I want to hear more, because I can watch these interviews, I can listen to the podcast, and your values are consistent throughout everything that you do. But I wanted to really interact with you and hear just your perspective. I think that for our listeners that are, you know, very similar to Steve and myself, where, you know, I've been playing now for years. I found this game kind of happenstance, and we've stumbled into it, and now we're doing this podcast and we're doing YouTube content. I mean, it's great. But I know that a lot of folks that are listening to our show, and a lot of my friends that I've talked to, are looking to potentially make the leap to get to maybe enter a tournament for fun, or actually be competitive, or really just be a better opponent, which I think is what Vanguard Tactics is all about. You know, if you could spend just a couple of minutes here as we wrap things up, a little bit of a pitch for our listeners to get into Vanguard Tactics. How can they take their game to the next level and get introduced to 40K and be a better opponent?
Well, first of all, before I jump into that, all I would say is, getting back to my point on the like, do you get cover or not? It's just the way you approach things is, hey, do you know do I get the benefits of cover here? That is an open dialogue conversation to have with someone. What you're really doing is checking a rule interaction, and you're testing and seeing if your opponent knows. And if they go, I'm not sure, you're like, cool, should we look in the rule book? Yeah, let's do that. Like, it's how you conduct yourself and how you talk to other people, I always think is, again, I want to put out there what I want to see in return, right? So I would like someone to engage with me and go, hey, Steve, do you know the rule on this? I'm like, oh, I'm not actually sure. Let's look that up. Or let's roll it and see if it matters, and then we'll check it after if there was a role requirement or something. But I think just being approachable and being just well-mannered goes such a long way, because other people resonate so well to that. This one person at a particular event I played at, and I said, hey, I'm really, really sorry, but I think you've moved that vehicle just a little bit too far. When you go around the corner, you're going to have to make the distance for how far you pivot, because a vehicle just can't, move
straight.
Move around a corner, right? It's actually got to, move a fair bit. And he just went, incorrect. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll let that one go. And then I was like, okay, well, this is how I would measure that personally. Now, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying this is how I would measure it. And then I'm testing their reaction. And then I'm seeing, okay, are they going to respond well to this or not? And if not, if I'm still getting like a very kind of disgruntled vibe, I'm like, well, let's just get a judge and ask them how they would measure it. And they'll come over and be like, you measure it like this. Cool. So we now both know going forward, we measure it this way. And that is, it's just so simple to be polite and in a way that is discussion based. So how can you and I learn these really complex rules together and more succinctly? Succinctly? I don't know. Anyway, awful word.
Together. I mean, it's real. Yeah, it's just kind of trying to find common ground. I think is maybe the best way to look at it, is that we're here to play a game, and there's these really complicated rules that everybody's going to forget. How can we collectively together here have a great experience and figure this rule out together? And then one of us is going to be right or wrong, but it doesn't matter, because we're both going to learn something.
The worst one, I do have a bit of a pet peeve on that, is when someone goes, should we 4-up it? I'm like,
oh,
no.
just random,
just
like,
random.
oh,
like you think the rule's this, I think the rule's that, and you want to just roll a dice, and 4, 5, or a 6, we roll it your way, or a 1, 2, 3. I'm like, no, I want to find the truth. I don't care whether I'm right or wrong. What I'm searching for is the truth, because that way, then going forward, I can make informed decisions based on knowing the truth and the whole truth of the rule, rather than, well, next time I play, I might roll better, so therefore I'll get the decision in my favor. Like, that doesn't help me make a decision, you know. Anyway,
and you'll never know.
So,
there's a whole team of people that pined over those rules and wrote them for a specific reason for us to interpret and put together appropriately. That's the whole integrity of the game, right? It's
100%.
not a game if there's no rules, but
Yep. 100%. So, more about, I suppose, the academy that we have. Our signature course goes on for 15 weeks. And we are, I don't know when this will go out, but basically the course starts on the 4th of March. So we don't open our doors very often. They happen 2 to 3 times a year. We open the doors for enrollment because we want this to be like an online university course where all the students go through at the same time, so we can gather the momentum. We drip feed modules. There is over 176 lessons on this academy course. It takes you through every single week. You get a new module, from army list writing to, and in that module there'll be 8 or so lessons, which are anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes long, discussing how to actually critically appraise the units in your army, how to read your codex correctly, to game management of how quickly you control your attrition rate of units at the table, to modules on deployment, modules on the missions, which secondaries are best to take on what missions and why. Should you play fixed? Should you play tactical? With what types of armies? How you develop a play style for your faction and one that you're really going to enjoy. We've got modules on every phase of the game. Tournament preparation. We've got a module dedicated to sportsmanship and fair play. We've got a Discord community where we have our in-house tournaments with our students. We have training nights or club nights where people rock up and, just ask to see if they can play anyone. And we're really about fostering a community that is team-based, where if you and I are playing on TTS and there's something that I know you could do that would really kind of, screw me over, I'll be like, do this instead. Put me in an awkward spot. And you'll be like, really? I never thought to do that. I'd be like, well, let's give it a try, because I really think that would be the play. And if it pans out to be a load of trash, I'll be like, yeah, do you know what? I was wrong. Go back to what you were doing and go do the other thing you were going to do instead, right? Because that's what you would do in practice. It doesn't matter who wins or loses in our club night training nights. What the most important thing is who's learning the most, who's developing the best skill set, who's being a great opponent, and then who can, when they go to a local gaming store, when they go to a tournament, when they're playing against their, biggest, peer in the game, as it were, they can express skill and they can show off, but in a good way. Like, it's, if I move this unit here and I do that, then I get this really cool domino effect where I pull off this really crazy move, and your opponent's there like, that was a good play. That was really good. Because that's ultimately what we want, is for people to have those experiences where you become community leaders because you've done the academy, where people will come to you for list advice. They'll be like, oh, can I get your opinion, Steve, on this list?
Yeah.
Or, hey, David, I know you're an absolute rules lawyer. What's your take on this rule? And you're like, well, actually, I read the FAQ yesterday, and it's such and such. And one of I think the biggest things that we try and do is, like we said, we've created positivity in our community. And when 9th edition there was a lot of YouTubers, I think at one point, really going hard on GW for 9th edition. It's too complex. There's too many stratagems, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, 10th edition drops. And guess what? Those YouTubers, because the clickbait titles still work, they still do it. 10th edition, load of this, But they created an echo chamber of negativity. But if you ask my academy students what you thought of 9th edition, they were like, oh, it's great. I love it. Yeah, cool. There's a lot of stratagems, but there's only actually 5 that are any good. So you don't need to remember the other 13. Fair. Whereas I'd actually say in 10th edition, it's even more complex. You're like, cool. So you've got a codex There's 6 detachments in there. So that's a potential of 36 stratagems I need to remember, unless it's armor contempt, because then there's 30. There's a potential of 24 enhancements that you could have. Every single leader has an ability. I need to remember that. And then the unit rule that also has, you're like, this game's just as complex, right?
Yeah.
But it was because a very like outspoken community hated on 9th edition so much. But then have continued to do so in 10th edition. And what have we learned? Actually, that the opinions of others doesn't really matter. The most important opinion is yours and your friendship group. That is the most important opinion that you can really listen to. And yeah, as a community and as an academy, we try and give people those bite-sized chunks to stay up to date with all the little changes, so they don't feel like they're being... let's say they have a couple of weeks out or a month out because work got really busy, or you had a newborn, or life got in the way. You can come back into the academy and go, hey guys, what have I missed? I've been out for the last month. Don't worry, I got you. Couple of changes on this. There was a balanced data slate. Here's a link. Here's a video to watch that Steve's done on the academy. All of our lessons will be updated to make sure it reflects all the new rules changes. We'll email you to go, hey, check this out because we've just added a new module in called the balanced data slate or whatever. So it's just keeping people feeling like they're not lost, that they have a place, and they can stay up to date with this awesome game that we love playing.
That's great.
No, I love it. I think there's so much content. I think there's already a lot of content with the academy. I mean, you talked about all the modules that are available, but the key, especially for our listeners, if the 40K is already an overwhelming game at times, but and from a leadership standpoint, part of the job of a leader, and I see this reflected in Vanguard Tactics, part of the job of a leader is to look at all of the chaos and try to simplify it for people to stay on mission. This is what this is about. Let's work on the first step. Don't worry about all 176 steps right now. Let's just go to the first one, and then we'll see what happens after that. So I think carving it up into bite-sized chunks for people to be able to absorb one at a time is that part of that journey that they can be on without having to look at, oh man, now I have to be fully prepared and everything. It's a really cool way to learn the game, and most importantly, to enjoy the game. So for any of our listeners, if you are considering, and I highly recommend that you do, any of these courses, especially the Academy with Vanguard Tactics, we have a special offer. If you put in the discount code Dadhammer, we will get a nice discount for you off of the price of the Academy, which is a really cool offer. Stephen, thank you so much for making that available to our listeners. And I highly recommend that you check out vanguardtactics.com. Look into all of the content that's available, especially the Academy. There's even some free stuff on YouTube to give it a little teaser. There's some quizzes online with Vanguard Tactics. Really, it's a great way to jump into 40K without feeling like you have to jump in. Right? You can kind of dip your toe into the waters a little bit and then absorb it however you want to. So really cool. Really admire what you're doing, Stephen, and everyone at the Vanguard Tactics team. I know it's a lot of work, but just know that everything that you're doing for the community is highly, highly appreciated. I mean, I appreciate it so much personally. You've inspired me to get this going and just put myself out there and see what happens. So continue doing what you're doing. I really appreciate your time and just taking some time out of your schedule. I know you've got a busy one to chat with us and give our listeners something to chew on for the next week. So Stephen Box, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope you get some sleep and have a great week, sir. I know you've got a lot ahead of you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me on. I hope I was a good enough guest for you.
Oh, man. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful guest.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, Steve, it's been wonderful interacting with you as well. And David, I know we obviously messaged, but yeah, great to visually meet you. But if you guys, I want to see you both at LVO. Okay, so
gosh,
I set you the challenge to be at the LVO 2025. Okay.
All right. Fantastic. Well, the challenge is now there. I've already talked about it. I've mentioned it to my wife. Like I got to get to a tournament at some point. So, so it's out there. Stephen, thank you so much. We will Catch everyone on the Dadhammer Podcast next week. Again, if you want to see more, VanguardTactics.com. Check out the Competitive 40K podcast as well. It's a great listen and well worth your time. For Steve and myself, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
See you, everybody.